Long ago, in a forest where the wind whispered old secrets through the trees, lived a fox named Rilo. He was clever, quick, and curious. But above all, he was restless. While most animals in the forest lived in peace, Rilo always felt something missing. A need to be seen, to be better, to be more. One morning, Rilo stood by the river, watching his reflection ripple with the current. "Why am I just another fox?" he muttered. "Why don't others follow me, admire me, or ask for my wisdom like they do with Elder Rowan?" Elder Rowan was the old sage of the forest, a kind man with silver hair and calm eyes who lived in a hut made of vines and stone. He rarely spoke, but when he did, every animal listened. Even the wind paused for him. Rilo had watched how others gathered around the elder, seeking his words, his silence, his approval. Rilo wanted that. Not to be like Rowan, but to be above him. "If I can make them see me," Rilo thought, "I will be greater than the wise old man." But that very thought was the beginning of something else. A quiet seed, planted deep, a voice that kept whispering, "You're not enough. Do more. Be more. Outshine them all." That night, while the forest fell asleep, Rilo's mind raced. He thought of plans to impress, of stories to fake, of animals to outwit. Sleep wouldn't come. Only ideas, loud, fast, endless. He didn't know it yet, but that was the first test. Not from the forest, not from others, but from his own thoughts. The next morning, Rilo awoke groggy. His head buzzed, not from noise, but from his own mind spinning in loops. He stepped outside and found the forest unusually quiet. But inside him, it was anything but. As he wandered, he came across a squirrel scolding a bluebird for stealing berries. Then a group of rabbits whispering about how Elder Rowan had once predicted a storm days before it came. "See?" Rilo thought. "Even in casual talk, it's always Rowan this, Rowan that." And that's when the thoughts returned. You could be admired like him. Tell them your ideas. Make them see you. Why wait? Act now. He took a deep breath and tried to push the thoughts away, but they clung to him like vines. That day, he climbed a high rock in the middle of the forest and declared, "From today on, I will offer advice to anyone who seeks it." His voice echoed. Some animals turned. A few came close out of curiosity. Rilo gave them vague advice, phrases he'd heard Rowan say. They nodded politely, but soon wandered off. That night, alone again, Rilo stared at the stars and felt a pit in his chest. Why didn't it work? I spoke. I acted. But it felt hollow. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, and a soft wind rustled the trees, whispering, not loudly, but clearly. Not every thought deserves a reaction. Determined not to give up, Rilo decided to try something bigger. If words didn't earn him the forest's respect, perhaps action would. He approached a young deer named Lyra, known for her grace and calmness. "Let's host a gathering," Rilo proposed. "An event where I can teach what I've learned from the forest." Lyra tilted her head. "But you're still learning, aren't you?" That stung. Rilo smiled to cover it. Learning never ends. But I've seen things, felt things. I know what others need to hear. They agreed. That evening, under a wide willow tree, animals gathered. Rilo stood tall, repeating lessons he'd picked up from Rowan, but louder, grander, flashier. He even mimicked the elder's voice and gestures. For a while, some animals clapped. Others simply blinked. A few snuck away. Then came a question from the back. If this is wisdom, why do you sound so unsure? It was Lyra. Rilo's smile dropped. Silence wrapped around him like fog. That night, he didn't sleep again. Thoughts flooded in. She embarrassed you. She doubts you. You have to prove them wrong. He paced, growled, rehearsed angry replies in his head, until finally, he ran through the night toward Rowan's hut, not to learn, but to demand answers. Or perhaps something else. The hut was quiet, the forest around it even quieter. As Rilo stormed toward the entrance, a deep calm wrapped around him like invisible mist. Elder Rowan was outside, sitting on a flat stone, pouring tea into a small cup. He didn't even look up. I came for truth, Rilo said sharply. Real wisdom, not riddles and whispers. Rowan sipped his tea. I've done what you've done. I've spoken like you, acted like you, but they don't listen to me. Why? Rowan finally looked at him. His eyes were clear, steady. Because your voice isn't quiet yet. Rilo frowned. What does that mean? The elder placed the cup on the stone. A calm voice doesn't come from being loud. It comes from mastering noise within. You've memorized words, Rilo, but you've reacted to every whisper in your head. That's not wisdom. That's performance. Rilo wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because deep inside, he knew it was true. He sat. For a while, they said nothing. Then Rowan spoke again. You think you need to be seen, but in chasing the eyes of others, you've turned away from your own truth. Not every thought is worth following. Not every feeling is fact. Silence again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. Rowan closed his eyes and whispered, ignore the thought. Feel the stillness. That's where truth lives. Rilo didn't respond. For once, he just listened. That night, Rilo stayed near the hut. He lay beneath a tree, staring up at the sky, watching the moon shift between clouds. Thoughts still came, but this time, he let them pass like drifting leaves. By morning, something inside him had shifted. For days, Rilo stayed in the forest's quietest part, where birds barely chirped and the wind didn't interrupt. He hunted when hungry, rested when tired. He listened, not to voices, but to silence. One evening, he heard Lyra's footsteps behind him. She sat nearby, without saying a word. You came to laugh at me? Rilo asked softly. She smiled. No, I came to see what happened to the fox, who finally stopped running. I thought being wise meant having all the answers, Rilo said. No, Lyra replied. Sometimes it just means not answering every question that rises in your own head. They sat under the sky as night settled. In the distance, other animals whispered again. This time not about Rowan, but about Rilo. Not for what he'd said, but for how he'd changed. He didn't try to prove anything, and somehow, that proved everything. Seasons passed. Rilo became known not as the loudest, but the calmest. Not for seeking praise, but for offering presence. One day, a young squirrel ran up to him. "Rilo, what's the secret to peace? How do you silence your thoughts?" Rilo smiled gently. "I don't silence them," he said. "I just don't follow everyone." The squirrel tilted its head. "But how do you know which to follow?" "You don't always know, but the ones that come from stillness, they feel different. They don't shout, they wait." That night, as stars filled the sky, Rilo sat by the same river he once stood before. His reflection still rippled, but he no longer stared, asking who he should become. He simply was, and that was enough.